Shadows of the Tower. Prologue. The Bloody Crown. Tower of London, 1483. The stones of the tower wept with mist that night. King Richard III stood in the shadows of the White Tower, his breath ragged, his hands trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of the deed about to be done. Before him, two small figures huddled together in the dark, Edward, Prince of Wales, and his younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury. The boys should have been asleep in their chambers, but fate had other plans. "You must understand," the king whispered, though his voice carried the finality of an executioner's axe. "It is not personal. It is the throne." The younger prince, wide-eyed, clutched his brother's sleeve. "Uncle, please." A sharp nod from the king. The guards stepped forward. The last thing the boys heard was the distant call of a raven and omen, a witness. Then, silence. Their bodies were never found, but the tower remembers. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, their whispers still echo through the bloody tower. Chapter 1. The Raven's Warning. Present day. Dr. Eleanor Hart had spent her life studying the dead. As a historian specializing in Tudor England, she had written papers on royal scandals, dissected centuries-old letters, and even handled Anne Boleyn's prayer book. But nothing could have prepared her for what awaited her at the Tower of London. Her invitation had come unexpectedly, a terse email from the Tower's head archivist, requesting her expertise on a newly discovered artifact related to the princes in the Tower. Eleanor had packed her bags within the hour. Now, standing beneath the looming shadow of Traitor's Gate, she felt an unnatural chill slither down her spine. The air smelled of damp stone and something else, something metallic, like old blood. Dr. Hart, a yeoman warder in his iconic red uniform, stepped forward, his face grim. "Follow me." They led her to the Tower Green, where a small crowd had gathered. A man in a black overcoat lay sprawled on the cobblestones, his eyes wide, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. His hands clutched a yellowed parchment. "Who is he?" Eleanor asked. "One of our researchers," the archivist murmured. "He was translating that document when he collapsed." Before Eleanor could respond, a harsh caw cut through the murmurs of the crowd. A raven, one of the legendary guardians of the tower, perched on a nearby railing, its beady eyes locked onto her. Then, impossibly, it spoke. "Blood calls for blood," it croaked, its voice like rusted hinges. "The tower keeps its secrets." The crowd gasped. The ravens of the tower were never supposed to speak. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for the dead man's parchment. The moment her fingers brushed the paper, a vision flashed behind her eyes. Two boys, whispering in the dark, a shadow with a crown, a knife, glinting in candlelight. She staggered back, heart pounding. The raven tilted its head. "Welcome, historian. The tower has been waiting for you." And just like that, Eleanor Hart realized she wasn't here to study history. She was here to uncover a murder. Chapter 2. Ghosts in the White Tower. The tower never truly slept. Eleanor Hart knew this now. After the raven's warning, she had spent the evening poring over the dead researcher's notes in the tower archives. The parchment he'd been holding was a fragment of a 15th century chronicle, one that spoke of the king's shadowed deed and to souls bound to stone, the princes. It had to be. But it was the sketch on the margin that chilled her, a crude drawing of a door hidden behind the White Tower's armory, marked with a symbol, a raven with a key in its beak. Now, well past midnight, Eleanor stood before that very wall, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. The yeoman warders had dismissed her questions, but she wasn't leaving without answers. She pressed her palm against the cold stone. A whisper brushed her ear. "Find us." She jerked back. The voice had been a child's. Then, the wall moved. With a grinding shudder, a section of stone slid aside, revealing a narrow passage choked with dust. The air that rushed out was frigid, smelling of mildew and something older: fear, desperation. Eleanor stepped inside. Her light flickered over walls scarred with centuries-old graffiti initials, prayers, desperate pleas. Then, her breath caught. Near the floor, in small, uneven letters, someone had carved, "Edward plus Richard. He lies." Her pulse roared in her ears. The princes. A gust of wind howled through the passage, extinguishing her flashlight. In the sudden dark, two small figures shimmered into view at the far end of the corridor, pale, golden-haired, their hands clasped together. "You see us?" one murmured. Eleanor's throat locked. Then, a new sound: footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching from behind. She spun, but the hidden door was already grinding shut, sealing her in. The last thing she saw before the dark swallowed her whole was the glint of a crown pin on the shadowed figure's lapel. Chapter 3: The Traitor's Gate. The Thames lapped hungrily at the steps of Traitor's Gate as Eleanor emerged from the tower's underbelly at dawn, disheveled and shaking. She had no memory of escaping the hidden passage. One moment, she'd been trapped. The next, she was stumbling into the courtyard, her fingers stained with rust, or was it blood? The human warders on duty pretended not to notice her wild-eyed appearance. But someone had been waiting for her. Marcus Foyle, a silver-haired archivist from the British Museum, intercepted her near the bloody tower. "Dr. Hart," he murmured, pressing a folded note into her hand. "You'll want to see this, but not here." In the privacy of a nearby cafe, Eleanor unfolded the brittle paper. It was a letter, its ink faded but still legible, written in a graceful, looping hand, and Bullen's hand, dated May 17, 1536, 2 days before her execution. "To the one who remains true. He has ordered my death, but the greater betrayal came not from Cromwell's lies, but from within these walls. The lieutenant's key opens more than cells. Find the Raven's Eye, and you will see what was stolen from me and why they fear my daughter's crown." Eleanor's mind raced. The tower's lieutenant, the official who'd overseen Anne's imprisonment. Had he been complicit in her downfall? And what had been stolen? Then, she noticed it, a tiny symbol at the bottom of the page. The same raven and key design from the hidden door. A waiter bumped her table, jolting her from her thoughts. When she looked back at the letter, the ink at the edges had begun to smolder, blackening as if burned by invisible flames. Bloody hell! She dropped it just as the paper crumbled to ash. Across the street, a figure in a dark coat watched from the shadows. The ravens knew, the ghosts knew, and now, so did Eleanor. The tower's secrets were alive, and someone would kill to keep them buried. Chapter 4: The Keeper of Keys. The tower's chief yeoman warder, Edmund Graves, had the look of a man who had spent too many years keeping secrets. His face was weathered like the tower's stones, his eyes sharp but shadowed. When Eleanor Hart demanded answers about the hidden passage and the vanishing letter, he led her to the jewel house after hours, but not to show her the crown jewels. Instead, he unlocked a rusted iron door marked "Restricted Archives." Inside, the air smelled of old parchment and gunpowder. "You're not the first to dig too deep," Graves said, his voice low. In 1671, a man named Thomas Blood nearly stole the crown jewels. But the official records lie. He wasn't just a thief. He slid a ledger across the table. The entry for May 9, 1671, was smudged deliberately so but Eleanor could still make out the words. Blood did not act alone. The lieutenant permitted his entry. Objective: retrieval, not theft. Item taken from the White Tower vault, one silver casket, marked with the Raven's Eye. Eleanor's pulse quickened. The same symbol from Anne Bullen's letter. "What was inside?" she asked. Graves hesitated. Then, a floorboard creaked behind them. A figure stood in the doorway, a man in a 17th-century cavalry coat, his face half rotted, his eyes burning with a natural light. Thomas Blood's ghost. "You shouldn't have opened that book," the specter hissed. Graves yanked Eleanor back as the ledger burst into blue flames. The ghost lunged, then vanished as the tower's midnight bell tolled, but not before whispering one last thing. The scaffold hides the truth. Chapter 5: The Scaffold's Secret. At dawn, workers renovating Tower Green made a grisly discovery. Beneath the execution site wherein Bullen, Lady Jane Grey, and so many others had died, a skeleton clad in Tudor rags was unearthed. Clutched in its bony fingers was a locked iron box, its surface engraved with the now familiar raven's eye. Eleanor was summoned immediately. The moment she touched the box, the tower's ravens erupted into a frenzy, their cries like screaming metal. The box's lock clicked open on its own. Inside lay three things. 1. A map of the tower's underground passages, with a chamber beneath the chapel royal marked in blood-red ink. 2. A miniature portrait of a young Elizabeth I, her fingers pressed to her lips in warning. 3. A ring in Bullen's famed emerald, the one she'd supposedly thrown to a loyal servant before her death. But as Eleanor lifted the map, the skeleton's hand suddenly grabbed her wrist. Its jaw creaked open. "Beware the keeper," it rasped. Then, the ground trembled. The chapel's bells began to ring, though no one had pulled the ropes. And from the direction of Traitor's Gate, the distant sound of a woman laughing drifted on the wind. Chapter 6: The Prisoner's Curse. The dream started the night Eleanor touched the skeleton's hand. She saw flashes of a dark cell, the stench of rotting straw, and the rasp of iron manacles. Then fire, always fire. But this was no ordinary nightmare. When Eleanor woke, her wrists were ringed with bruises that hadn't been there before, her throat raw as if she'd been screaming. Scratched into the wood of her bedside table were two words: "Help me." She wasn't the only one suffering. Daniel Morrill, a quiet archivist at the tower, had been experiencing his own visions that weren't his own. "I see the axe falling," he whispered when Eleanor confronted him. "I feel it, every night. And I know, God help me, I know it's because my ancestor was Lady Jane Grey." His hands trembled as he unbuttoned his collar. Around his neck, a livid red mark, like a blade's kiss. That evening, beneath the flickering gaslights of the Beauchamp Tower, Daniel led Eleanor to a cell where prisoners had carved their names into the walls. His fingers traced one inscription: Yane. Asteriskl her spelling, he said. She wrote it just before they took her to the block. "And now ... she's writing through me." As he spoke, the temperature plummeted. Their breath fogged the air. Then a child's voice, whispering from the stones: "Find the lion. It knows the traitor." The gaslights blew out. When they flickered back on, Daniel was gone. Only his scarf remained, knotted like a noose on the floor. Chapter 7: The Royal Menageries Beast. The tower's old royal menagerie had been closed for centuries, but the ghosts of its beasts remained. Eleanor found the records in the archives. December 1542, a lion of the menagerie roared without cease for 3 nights. On the 4th morn, Queen Catherine Howard was arrested for treason. Now, the lion was back. Tourists reported hearing growls near the brick tower. Security cameras showed paw prints scorched into the frost. And tonight, as Eleanor searched for Daniel, she saw it, a massive lion, its fur matted with phantom blood, its eyes glowing like molten gold. It stared at her. Then it turned and padded toward the bloody tower. She followed. The lion stopped before a forgotten alcove where a new carving had appeared, a crude lion's head with a dagger in its jaws. Beneath it, a message in fresh scratches: "The keeper wears the crown's face." A roar shook the stones. Eleanor spun. Just as the lion leapt at her throat, she woke on the ground, unharmed. The beast was gone, but pressed into the dirt beside her was a single emerald, the mate to Bullen's ring. And on the tower's outer wall, where no graffiti should be, Someone had painted a huge raven in what looked like blood. Its wings were spread, its beak was open, and it was laughing. Chapter 8. The Bloody Tower's Witness. The warden's archives held secrets even the crown didn't know. Eleanor Hart knelt in the dust-choked undercroft beneath the bloody tower, her fingers tracing the cracked spine of a ledger marked Reg. Privy Matters. 1483 to 1485. The pages smelled of mildew and old iron. Then she found it. Tucked between records of grain shipments and prisoner transfers was a faded confession, written in the shaky hand of a man who knew death was coming. I, James Tyrrell, by order of my king, did oversee the burial of 2 brothers in the stair beneath the White Tower, but I swear by God's teeth the younger one still breathed when we left him. Eleanor's pulse roared in her ears. Richard of Shrewsbury alive. A shadow fell across the page. Marcus Foyle stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. You weren't supposed to find that. Before she could react, he tossed her a small iron key. The Chapel Royal. Midnight. If you want to know what really happened to the princes, come alone. As he left, Eleanor noticed the raven and key sigil engraved on the key, the same symbol from Anne Boleyn's letter. The tower's bell struck 11. Somewhere above her, a child began to sob. Chapter 9. The Crown of Shadows. The Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula was silent at midnight, its pews empty, its altar lit only by the moon through stained glass. Eleanor inserted the key into a hidden lock beneath the choir stalls. With a groan of ancient mechanisms, a section of the floor slid open, revealing a spiral staircase. The air below smelled of damp earth and candle wax. At the bottom, a circular chamber flickered with black candles. The walls were covered in names every prisoner ever executed at the tower, from Anne Boleyn to Nazi spy Joseph Jacobs. At the center stood 7 hooded figures in tattered Tudor robes. The tallest removed his hood. Edmund Graves, the chief yeoman warder. "Welcome to the Keepers of the Raven," he intoned. "We are the ones who bury the tower's truths." A figure stepped forward, Marcus Foyle, now wearing a pendant with the raven and key. "Your historian's mind led you here," he said. "But what you seek is dangerous. The younger prince survived and his bloodline lives on." Graves lifted a candlelit portrait from the shadows. Eleanor gasped. It was Queen Elizabeth II, but the painting was centuries old. "The crown has always known," Graves whispered. "The tower's truer walks among us, and the keeper you fear. He is the first of us, the man who murdered the princes. He never died. He simply ... continued. The candles blew out. In the dark, cold fingers brushed Eleanor's neck. A voice that wasn't human hissed, "You should have stopped digging." Chapter 10. The Last Sentinel. The tower trembled. Eleanor Hart stood in the White Tower's inner sanctum, the air thick with the scent of burning candle wax and something darker, old blood. Old magic. The Keepers of the Raven surrounded her, their hooded faces shadowed in the flickering torchlight. Before her, on a stone pedestal, lay the Crown of Shadows, a circlet of black and silver, its peaks shaped like raven's wings, its center holding a single blood-red jewel. "The first keeper's crown," Graves intoned, "worn by Richard III when he made his pact with the tower. He bound his soul to these stones to protect England's secrets ... forever." The ground shook. The walls whispered. And then he stepped from the darkness. Richard III, his body neither living nor dead, his skin like parchment stretched over bone, his eyes to pits of smoldering embers. The crown of shadows floated from its pedestal and settled onto his brow. "The tower chooses its sentinels," the dead king rasped. "You have seen too much, historian. Now you must serve or silence." The ghosts of the tower materialized around them, and Boleyn, her neck crooked at that terrible angle, Lady Jane Grey, her hands outstretched as if still begging for mercy, the 2 princes, their small fingers intertwined, and behind them hundreds more. Eleanor's breath came in sharp gasps. She clutched Anne's emerald ring in one hand, the prince's map in the other. "I won't be your next keeper," she spat. Richard smiled a corpse's grin. "Then you will be our next sacrifice." The ghosts surged forward. Just as the tower's ravens descended in a shrieking storm of feathers and fury. The raven flies. 1 year later, the new chief yeoman warder adjusted his uniform, the raven's eye sigil hidden beneath his collar. Outside, tourists laughed and snapped photos, oblivious to the whispers in the stones. In the shadows of Traitor's Gate, a single raven watched the new keeper take his oath. And deep beneath the tower, in a chamber sealed since 1483, a black crown waited. The tower always kept its secrets, and it always would.